O'Reilly! You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Chairman,
you're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. Arnie Sherman, good Sunday morning.
Good morning to you, Scott. This is our last show of 2020, and I couldn't think of a better guest to invite back on than Ilene Waterstone, Steve Martin's personal assistant, my cousin, and someone who doesn't mince words about anything. And I think she will be a very enlightening and energizing guest to do a postmortem on 2020.
100% agree, Arnie. Back after this with our guest, Ilene Waterstone. Arnie Sherman, we are back with our esteemed guest, Ilene.
Third time.
Right.
Ilene Waterstone from L.A. Ilene, there's been many, many occurrences in this past year. This is sort of the year in review show, and we couldn't think of a better person to talk about that with than you.
Or but wrap up the year with.
Wrap up, yeah. Year in review, wrap up. Right. Postmortem of all of the groups that were created and we've learned about this year. Antifa, Proud Boys, all of these new things that come into our vernacular. My favorite, and the one that I'm most interested in, is Grannies with Masks. You are the founder of. So will you share with our listeners the story of Grannies with Masks?
Well, fortunately, I did start this organization, and then, I had one action, and then it kind of didn't happen again. But I think that, we're still going to have to do another action. But,
you were all over the L.A. news. I saw you on TV, and you were covered citywide.
Well, I live on the west side of Los Angeles, which is a very affluent area. I live in an area called Brentwood. And, this was quite a few months ago, and I live on actual Sunset Boulevard. So I see a lot of foot traffic and a lot of car traffic. But, I think it was probably the middle of March that we were initially told to stay at home. That, we realized that there was this, virus, this new virus that was present, and that it was already beginning, to affect people. And not only were we told to stay at home, but we were told to, start wearing face masks. And, face masks, can I just talk about that? That has become the most unbelievable industry. Face masks. Every fancy designer is now making face masks. Like St. John, a very high-end women's, clothing line, is making face masks.
And how much is St. John's charging for these face masks?
Theirs are $40 a piece. Mm-hmm. Or you can get, the cheap medical ones, which apparently are actually the most protective, the 3-ply disposable face masks. But there's all these fancy and beautiful. I had to make a whole drawer for my face masks. I've been ordering them like a lunatic. I don't know. I just can't stop ordering face masks.
I prefer the ones that can also be used to rob a bank.
Well, exactly.
They should have more than one use eventually.
Do you have your own drawer for the face masks?
I do. I have a drawer for them because they started taking over my lingerie drawers. So I had to clean out another drawer with T-shirts that I never wore, and I put those in the garage, and now I have a drawer for masks.
Just don't mix them up, Ilene.
No, exactly. And I shouldn't go out with a pair of underpants over my head, which, at some point in my life I might have. But anyway, so I got more and more frustrated, which, by the way, that frustration has not ebbed at all. towards, the people in my very affluent neighborhood who seemed to think that they were exempt from this, this request to put a piece of cloth over their faces.
What about the fire station across the street from you? How's that been?
There's a fire station across the street from me, and here is the sad juxtaposition that I see on a daily basis. I sit in my living room, which has a big bay window, which my cats like to, sit in also. And the three of us, I have a couple of cats, and we sit in my living room, which I now refer to as the Judgment Lounge. It's the Judgment Lounge. And I watch the paramedics go out a lot now from the fire station across the street. And I am convinced that a lot of the calls that they are on is to pick up people who have, dire symptoms of COVID, because our emergency rooms in the county of Los Angeles are now at 0% availability because there are so many people in the hospital with COVID. Now, there are several reasons for this. People don't wear masks. People don't social distance. People were asked not to gather over the holidays, and they did. People have been asked not to travel, and they are. I mean, we saw a minuscule decrease in the number of passengers traveling over Thanksgiving over last year. But anyway, several months ago, I was watching this phenomenon, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to get a megaphone. I'm going to ride in a car with a friend. And I am going to yell at everyone not wearing a mask that I see on the street, and I'm going to say, please wear a mask. Granny doesn't want to die. And I am a grandmother. I have 2 grandchildren. And we've been shown that, that seniors are the most vulnerable of all populations. I mean, I'm pleased to see that, I'm turning 70 in March, and I'm pleased to see that will immediately move me up in the group that's going to get the vaccine, which, I'm going to take the minute I can get in line, by the way. We also have anti-vaxxers in this area, just these privileged people who just somehow think that they're exempt from getting the virus, or they're not going to get the virus, or the vaccine is going to cause more problems than the virus. I mean, they're like all amateur scientists. So anyway, I started this thing. I had a motorcade of about 12 cars. We had signs in the window, like mask it or casket, put on a mask, Granny doesn't want to die. And we rode all through Brentwood, Santa Monica, Venice, and then back to my house. And unbeknownst to me, a couple of the people who were involved in this called the local news. So we had ABC, we had NBC, we had KNX radio, and then NBC sent some of the feed to the Today Show. So we were on Sunday morning, and then we were on Lester Holt on Monday night. This happened on a Saturday. I mean, this was just unbelievable. Now, the problem is I didn't keep the momentum going. But I know that it's time for more actions. I did start a Facebook group. We have about 2,000 members. And you have to be pro-mask in order to join. But we need more actions like this. I did buy a megaphone of my own, and I borrowed the other one. And, I hope to do another action soon, because here's the truth. Every person pretty much who walks a dog in my neighborhood doesn't wear a mask. I don't know if they think that the dog is going to protect them. I mean, Arnie, do you think that Stella is going to protect you from the virus?
Yes. She's going to bark. She's going to bark it away, and I won't have to deal with it.
Scott, do you have dogs?
I have 2.
Yes.
And are they going to protect you from the virus?
Not at all.
See?
They're going to give me the virus because they lick everybody.
Yeah, they lick everybody and then lick Scott.
Anyway, I find it so frustrating that people cannot just put a simple piece of cloth over their faces. It would prevent so much of the transmission that's going on here. I had an encounter last week. I'm standing on the street with my friend Tom. He had come over to pick up a book from me. We were both masked up. We were standing pretty far away from each other. And 3 people go by walking a dog, none of them wearing masks. And I go, hey, how about a mask? And the guy looks at me and he goes, it's none of your business. And if I had been quicker on my feet, I would have said, wrong answer. It's everybody's business.
Yeah,
now.
Of course.
And if it happens again, I'm going to.
I saw somebody online this week that said they have talked it over with their family, and they are spending the holidays with their family, and they've all decided that they would rather die than not be together for the holidays.
That's insane.
And you know what I'm thinking about is, well, maybe they've made that pact with each other, but they can affect lots of other people. And what about those people? They don't have the right to decide whether they kill somebody else outside of their family.
I mean, I read recently in November, there was this big gathering down in Tulum in Mexico. I mean, they didn't do, Burning Man this year, which, by the way, I'd rather eat glass than go to Burning Man, for God's sake. But they were down in Tulum. It's like some big art and music thing. All these young people, no masks, no social distancing, big underground parties. And you know what I thought of? I thought of the poor Mexicans who work in those hotels who can't afford not to go to work, and all the people that got affected, and all the people that came back to the United States and Europe or wherever the hell they were from. And it's like these super spreader events. I mean, those idiots down in Florida, those young Republicans, they had some big party at Mar-a-Lago yesterday, like Charlie, Kirk, who got kicked out of college, and Eric, this has nothing to do with masks, but now Charlie Kirk and Eric Trump are spreading this idea that Trump won because he won more counties. I mean, how many people are in your county? There's 10 million in mine, and Joe Biden won mine. So what counties are we talking about here?
Yeah, well, they're going to dice it and slice it any way they can possibly think at this point. They've exhausted every other possibility. But let me just ask you this. What? You got all these anti-vaxxers and a lot of elected officials and people that weren't paying attention to masks and called it a hoax. But isn't it ironic or sad or, stupefying that as soon as vaccine becomes available, folks like Marco Rubio and others are the first in line to get one, to get an vaccination?
It infuriated me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just outrageous.
Marco Rubio, Mike Pence.
Yeah.
All these guys now get up and they're getting the shot.
They're getting the front of the line.
I'm waiting for that dumb governor from South Dakota, Kristi Noem or whatever.
Right, Kristi Noem.
Her own grandmother just died in a nursing home where there was a huge COVID outbreak. There's no evidence that her grandmother had it, but she just died. And then she flies off to Washington for some big anti-mask event with all of her buddies. I'm waiting for her to line up to get the shot. I just can't wait.
Sure. Well, it's part of the whole privilege thing. Let me switch the focus a little bit at this point.
Yes, please.
You're in Tinseltown. There's been a great disruption of the movie industry, of the performing arts, all of that as a result of COVID. How do you see this? How do you see the industry coming out of this? What's going to happen?
They're actually shooting stuff,
Yes, I know.
How are they doing that, Eileen?
Well, my own boss is shooting a television show, which I can't really talk about, except that it's called Only Murders in the Building, with Martin Short and, oh God, I'll think of her name in a minute. She's, young and fabulous. Anyway, they get COVID tested 3 times a week. Everybody gets COVID tested. They're in pods. They're, they're not allowed to all mingle anymore. I mean, everybody has to stay in their own zone or their pod or whatever. I mean, I find it a little frightening. I do. But they're doing it. I don't think it's on a, necessarily a widespread basis, but my friends who live a few blocks away, the house across the street from theirs fills in as Larry David's house in Curb Your Enthusiasm, and they're shooting on their street. And I don't know that everybody is necessarily observing like the strictest of COVID protocols, according to her, that some of the, some of the crew are like walking around not necessarily wearing masks. I mean, what do you
think of the Tom Cruise kind of rant?
Well, first of all, I think he's insane. I mean, right. I've thought he's in Scientology, so he's insane just to begin with. He's a huge egomaniac. And, I don't think that he should be able to get away with treating people like that. I mean, I heard the audio of that. I mean, he's just nuts. And I think it was two people who weren't, observing like the kind of social distancing he thought. But think about this. His best buddy is David Miscavige, who's, the head of Scientology that I think murdered his own wife, I think she's buried somewhere out in the desert. So, nobody loves a cult.
Allegedly.
By the way.
Yeah, allegedly.
Allegedly. But the most important, but it is interesting how Hollywood has figured out how to get back to work, albeit in a smaller scale.
Well, the one part about it that's really interesting that I don't understand yet, I understand, Curb Your Enthusiasm is already on a platform and it's on the same platform. However it aired before on HBO or Showtime or whatever, it's still airing. But what happens when they're shooting what used to be a movie and the revenue from theater, participants was the way they generated their return? Now they sell it like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. They sell it to a online platform. They can't possibly be making the same kind of money they were making when they released it theatrically.
Oh, I don't think they can, but I think that they're trying to do whatever it is that they can in order to keep this going until such time, after we get the vaccine. I mean, my feeling about what's going to happen with COVID, and it's not just based on my own opinion. I've talked to people, including my brother, who's very smart, and that what we think is going to happen, or most people think is going to happen, is we will get the vaccines. I just saw something online that Pfizer is now going to get much more raw material in order to manufacture millions more doses. So I think it's going to come to people sooner, I hope. And then they will come up with better medications in order to treat the symptoms, much like what happened with AIDS. I mean, obviously the transmission of this virus is completely different from the transmission of AIDS. But I lived in Los Angeles and I had many gay friends in the 80s and 90s. And you never heard of anybody surviving AIDS back in the 80s or 90s. Everybody who got AIDS died. I mean, that's the simple truth. Everybody died. Now we hardly ever hear about anybody dying from AIDS. And it's because the medications are better. There's no cure, and sometimes the regimen is horrendous, but people are taking the medications and they're actually living long lives, and I think that's what's going to happen with the COVID. It's not going away. I mean, there's that new strain that they just found in Britain, but then I read that they will be able to come up with a vaccine for that much sooner because they've already come up with a vaccine for this strain. But I'm no scientist. But I think that, that they're going to be able to get back to the business of making movies and TVs.
What about live performances? What about going to, a theater and seeing a play or an opera or a symphony?
Or music?
I think that's going to be the same thing. And who knows when that's going to happen. I mean, I have season tickets, to the local theater here, the Amundsen, and to another theater here. And now they're coming back to the subscribers and saying, do you want a refund or are you willing to wait? And I'm willing to wait because the money is already gone. And I hope that will help them, have enough revenue to start up once these plays and musicals, begin touring again. I mean, the entire world has been turned upside down by COVID. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's no industry. There's no pursuit that hasn't been turned upside down by COVID.
What's the restaurant scene like? You're in the mecca of great restaurants in Brentwood and the surrounding area. What's happened to them?
They're going bankrupt. It's terrible. We had originally we were restricted to the first shutdown. We were restricted to, I think, outdoor dining and takeout. Then when things got better in the summer, they had a bit of indoor dining with like 25% capacity, and a lot of the restaurants were putting up like plexiglass partitions between tables and all of that. And then we had to stop indoor dining, and we were still doing outdoor dining, and now outdoor dining has been closed down again. And there's controversy about it because they are saying that it's not necessarily outdoor dining that's causing the problem. It's outdoor bar scenes with younger people later at night who are less likely to observe social distancing and masking and gather in much tighter groups. But you know, the restaurants are suffering. Most of my friends who have the ability and the money to do this are trying to order at least takeout or delivery 3 times a week from local restaurants to try and keep them going. To keep them. Are you traveling outside of your neighborhood at all? Are you getting in a car and going to, I took one trip to Joshua Tree a few months ago to what was then a safe situation. It's an Airbnb 3-unit place that's owned by a close friend. And I stayed in one place and she stayed in another part of it. And we ate outside and, we're practicing, really pretty safe behavior. We did get in a car together wearing masks. But then I was supposed to go back again, but she's traveled. She has made the decision. Right. She went to Austin. She went to Phoenix. And I no longer feel safe going there, nor do I feel safe really going anywhere.
So what's the grocery store experience like on 2 levels? How busy are they and how stocked are they in your area?
Grocery stores are very stocked. We still see name brand toilet paper on the shelves, which at the beginning we didn't. The one thing we still don't see, are like disinfectant wipes and sprays. And I don't, but then you hear about it and then everybody like rushes to get it and whatever. I've been shopping every week to 10 days. They have senior hours, which are very early in the morning, where they are much less full. So I generally shop at my little local supermarket at like 7:30 in the morning, and I can get everything I need. This week I did a grocery delivery from a service called Instacart because I'm having I'm having an epidural in a surgery center next Monday, and I have a mandatory COVID test tomorrow, and I've been asked to voluntarily self-quarantine before and after the test, which I'm doing. So yesterday I got a service to do shopping for me, and they deliver it in a contactless way to your house. So
you mentioned that Steve Martin, who you are the personal assistant of, just for our audience, our guest is Ilene Waterstone. Yes. So production is happening, but fewer productions. Has he said to you how production has been impacted? Does it feel very different, or is it they're trying to keep it like business as usual? To your point, there's people, they're separating and social distancing, and testing, but
they're shooting it in New York, so I'm not there because I can't live in New York. So I don't know firsthand what's going on. I mean, if this were a normal year, I would be in New York, I would be on set, I would be doing all of that stuff, but I can't go to New York. So, and I don't want to go to New York, quite frankly. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't feel safe getting on an airplane. I mean, I know that people are doing it, and I've heard various and sundry reports about it, but I just don't want to do it under any circumstances. I think that production is going along and I think that people are having a good time. By the way, the third co-star is Selena Gomez. I just have trouble remembering names. And so, I think that it's going along fairly normally, but everybody has to be exceedingly careful. And so he says he's having a good time. That's all I know. But, again, his other career, which is the show that he does with Martin Short, they were in the UK and they had done 2 shows. They had done Glasgow and they had done Belfast. And I think they were about to do Dublin. And then they were supposed to do 2 nights at the Royal Albert Hall. And they canceled the rest of the tour. they chartered a plane and they came back to the U.S. And they're not sure when they can reschedule those dates. You know, Royal Albert Hall does want them, but they don't know when they can go back to the
Right, London is really shut up tight right now.
Oh, it's completely clamped down again in London because they have that new strain.
Mm-hmm. They have a new strain. I think every large-scale tour, right, that's speaking, if they were thinking about going out in 2021, they're now thinking about the latter half of 2021, most likely 2022.
And I think that's what's happening with most of the theater stuff as well.
Right. It's
going to take a long while for you to go into a theater with 6,000 other people and people sitting in every seat. You're going to have some confidence that
it's going to be like an airport.
That immunity is in play.
Well, let's talk about sports.
Yeah, your Dodgers.
Sports. Yeah, can we talk about the Dodgers for a minute? I mean, I can't believe, that because I've been to the last, I was at the last World Series, the ones where the Astros cheated, by the way.
Yes.
I mentioned that.
Cheaters.
Right.
Cheaters, the Houston Cheaters. Anyway, I would have been at the World Series if this were a normal year. I would have gone to at least one or two games, and instead they played in that bubble in Texas. And I'm still thrilled that we won. And they did sell a limited number of seats in the stadium. I had a friend who went. And it was interesting, though. I was watching in the stands, and not everybody was even wearing masks in the stands, even with those limited number of seats where they were supposed to all be sitting really far away from each other. But they did manage to play baseball. They did manage to play without very many players, getting infected. What's happening in football? I don't follow football. That looks like that's problematic.
They've had some schedule adjustments here and there, and they've switched games around just like, professionally. Professionally, it's been more on schedule than college. But let's not even forget, in baseball, it was a 60-game season.
I know.
That's 40% of what you would normally play, 35%.
It's also kind of sad for me. I mean, I would have liked to have seen us play the full season and win the World Series in front of the fans. I mean, it's been since 1988.
Al Franken, thanks for coming back on.
Sorry about that. I'm wondering, football is, I think, done really well. I think the NBA set the kind of led the way in how you should create the bubble and manage. I do think, back to performance for a second, that I think every venue is going to be an airport. I think there's going to be a level of queuing and getting there early and tested until a vaccine has been 100% or whatever, 70% I think is a number, where they feel like they'll herd you.
But even with that, Scott, it's hard to plan a whole season because no one knows how long the vaccine is going to protect anybody. It could be 4 months. Could be 3 or 4 months, and people are going to get reinfected again. It's like the flu vaccine. We all know you take them every year because they're only about 70% effective, and they wear off. And nobody knows how long these are going to last because we haven't had long enough to do trials with them to see what their staying power is.
Well, here's the interesting thing, though. I mean, there's the notion of flu season. And I guess maybe there's going to be a COVID season because there is definitely an upsurge as more people are spending time inside, during the winter, which is when people apparently, get more flus, when it's cold and people are gathered inside in very close contact with one another. But I don't know that anybody knows. I agree with you, Arnie. I don't know. I mean, we're living in a completely different world now.
Part of it is that clinical trials normally take 7 or 8 years.
Well, we don't have time for that.
Right, and we didn't have time for that. And part of the reason it takes that long is because you want to see how the lasting effect of the vaccine.
Right.
Does it? Is the cure worse than the disease? You don't know the long-term effect. And while they did a lot of sequential testing rather than not sequential. They did a lot of contemporaneous testing instead of sequential testing. there has not been enough time to see how long it maintains its antibody protection.
Oh, well, that's with the vaccine, but also even with people who have had COVID.
Right.
Who get who show, positive for antibodies afterwards. But, people are getting reinfected with COVID.
Right. And people that have the antibodies and who think they are protected doesn't mean they can't infect somebody else.
Yeah.
I've run into people who've said, I already had it, so I don't have to wear a mask. I've already had it.
That's not
true.
true.
What about the other people you're coming in contact with?
That's right. And you can be asymptomatic.
If you've gotten the vaccination, you're still supposed to wear the mask. So.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Let's pivot for a second and talk about one of your other favorite subjects, which is beating Donald Trump. And, I know, and since our first meeting.
Did you say meeting or beating?
Beating.
Oh, beating. Yes. That's my favorite subject.
I know Eileen. If you follow Eileen on her Facebook, especially back in the 2016-17 era, there would be at least 3 to 4 posts every day. There would be 4-letter words thrown around, and it would be quite entertaining. So, in keeping with the clean, the 7 dirty words that we can't say in the FCC, let's talk a little bit about Trump and kind of what the last 90 days have been about for you personally, because you've been campaigning since he started, and as have we all, about how to get rid of him. Well, now he's gone. At least we think he's gone. He's not gone, right? Talk a little bit about your thinking here.
It's exhausting. I said to somebody the other day, I said, I took a 2.5-hour nap. I'm exhausted, from the last 4 years. From the night that he won the election, where I drove, I don't drink, but I drove home from my friend's house where I watched the returns, like in a blackout. I was so stunned. I don't remember getting home. Because all of us, gathered together for a nice meal, and we were going to watch the first woman president, win the election. My heart is still broken about that. It's always so amusing to me, like when all the burners, I don't have much patience for the burners, when all the burners talk about, well, we're so heartbroken, and why don't you coddle us? And I'm like, what about us? We're heartbroken too. The Hillary supporters are heartbroken too, Anyway, right. It's been just a crap show from the beginning. You guys interviewed my father, who unfortunately lived long enough to see this jerk elected. And I think it actually hastened his demise, even though he was a very old man. But, my father lived through about 14 months of the Trump administration, which I still find, it still breaks my heart that he even had to experience that much of it. I'm grateful, by the way, that he didn't live long enough for COVID, because he lived in a senior place and I would not have been able to see him, which would have been hideous, because that place is under lockdown. I have a friend who lives there on the same floor where my father lived, and there's no traffic in and out of there. Anyway, so, to follow this, and you just think every time he does something, you think to yourself, this has got to be the thing that does it. And it never is. And it never is. And the fact that 74 million or 72 million or however many people voted for him in this election is mind-boggling. What it exposes, of course, is a thing that's always existed here. I'm not a fan of the statement, we're better than this, because the truth of the matter is we're not. We're not. This is a very racist country, in my opinion. And I think what happened, during the Obama administration, I'm a big supporter of the Southern Poverty Law Center, as was my dad. And we went to a forum at UCLA with then Director Morris Dees and Richard Cohen, the lead attorney for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And for your listeners who don't know what that is, it's an organization based out of Montgomery, Alabama, and they track hate groups. They were the ones who took down the big hate group in Idaho and Coeur d'Alene. They've taken down numerous hate groups, and they track them, all kinds of hate groups. And the name of the forum was The State of Hate in America. And this was during Obama's first term. And they talked about how, once this nation elected its first black president, that, racists were coming out from under all of their various, rocks. And what happened with the election of Trump is that they just came right out in the open, which is why we have, the Proud Boys, the Boogaloos, all of these crazy people. And the thing that blows my mind with these people is not only are they being encouraged by Donald Trump, like in Charlottesville, they're very fine people on both sides. But, just the other day, there was a demonstration in Salem, Oregon, a group of Proud Boys who came and, besieged the State House in Salem, Oregon. And here's the truth. If these people were black, they would have been shot. But they don't stop these people. And I think a lot of that, I'm going to just go right in, a lot of that has to do with the police. A lot of that has to do with the police. I think that the police in many of these, municipalities are in cahoots with these guys. How come? Why are they in cahoots? Well, I think that, there's a certain mentality of some people who go into law enforcement. And, in Southern California, in Los Angeles, particularly our sheriff's department, which is the group that oversees police work in the county of Los Angeles as opposed to the cities. But there are unincorporated parts of Los Angeles County, and the sheriffs, are there. There is a lot of racism that exists among the sheriffs. They have special little, affinity groups and they've been showing this, or how they behave they run the jails, by the way. Okay. And there has been so much racism in the jails, among the people who run the jails. Now, I'm not saying that all police are like this, and I am not anti-police. My father was a long-time reserve police officer, but I think there are certain segments of police departments that are in alignment with these groups. I don't know where that came from, but I really do believe that. Right, and the LAPD has a storied history of that goes even prior to Rodney. You in this country, you need less training to be a police officer than to be a hairstylist. That does not surprise me. Wow. But look what we saw this summer. Look at what we saw this summer. Look at the demonstrations that came to the fore after the killing of George Floyd. I can't breathe. So how do you feel about what Donald Trump has done since losing both the Electoral College, since losing on that Saturday after Election Day? Are you surprised at kind of the different tactics? God, no. Oh, God, no. Arnie and I had this conversation yesterday. He's a sociopath. He's a sociopath, and he's a complete and total narcissist. And he can't stand the idea of losing. So he's doing every single one of these scenarios. And the thing that I find the most satisfying, although, Mitch McConnell and his cohorts have done, irreparable damage to our judicial system by, packing the courts with these unqualified right-wing ideologues. But, Donald Trump thought that he stacked the court, with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Barrett, and they refused to hear his case. They refused to hear his case. Now he's raging around the White House and apparently, accusing everybody of disloyalty from Mike Pence on down, because he can hardly get anyone at this point to agree with his position. Even Mitch McConnell, who, as far as I'm concerned, is, possibly the worst person in American politics, even worse than Donald Trump in his own way. Even he has now been forced to accept and acknowledge that Joe Biden is the president-elect of the United States. And slowly but surely, everyone is peeling away from Donald Trump. But we see, I saw two of these crazy demonstrations. Like I said, I live on Sunset Boulevard, which is a well-traveled street. And there have been pro-Trump demonstrations in Beverly Hills, like weekly up until, I think, that night of the election. Like every Saturday, they would take over this like public park space, these pro-Trump lunatics. And there would be these big, they would be like motorcades with like, big monster trucks with Trump flags and American flags and, all this crazy stuff. And the week before the election, one of these went by my house, and I went out and screamed obscenities at them. But on the Saturday that they declared the election for Biden, another one of these guys, things went by, and I went out and I yelled at them, "Hey, I'm so sorry, but apparently nobody has told you. He lost. He lost, And they were like, and they were like, and there's still, these people who are caught up in these conspiracy theories.
Well, it's all part of the, we talked about this whole psychological notion of confirmation bias, which is you already made up your mind, so you're only going to read stuff that reinforces what your position is, and you're going to disregard everything that is not in support of what you're doing. That's
all
why
evidence to the contrary.
It doesn't matter. Fact is irrelevant. You've already made up your mind. You love Donald Trump, and you're only going to read stuff, and you want him to be president, so you can only read stuff that maybe allows that to happen, and you're going to consider, everything else as, fake news, as they call it.
But he set that up, the whole notion of fake news from the very beginning of his storied administration. The sheer number of lies that he's told since the beginning of this administration. I don't know what number it's up to now. But, all of his rabid cult followers, and I honestly believe that they're in a cult at this point. If he was like, Jim Jones and told them all, to drink the cyanide Kool-Aid, I think they would. Really, this is now cultish behavior that they don't allow anything else to seep in. I live across the street from a lunatic. I didn't know she was a lunatic until I ran into her at the parking lot of my local little supermarket right when the COVID started. And she said, she said the bird flu was much worse under Obama. And I thought, what? And I've made the mistake of going on the local internet bulletin board called Nextdoor. Now, Nextdoor serves two purposes. It can infuriate you, but it can also, alert you to which of your neighbors are, total crackpots. And this woman is a crackpot, and she posted something that was not true by our local city councilman. And then at one point she attacked me, and I don't think she knew it was me, and said, "You allow your hatred of Trump to blind yourself to, whatever, to the truth." And I thought, really? And that's how they feel about him. He is like dear leader.
Are there any people in your direct orbit of friends or circle of friends that are still supporting him?
No, they're gone. I've just written them off.
You have?
I had one guy that I kept around for, purposes of longevity because he had been a friend for years and years. But finally, he just did one more thing that pissed me off, and I blocked him on Facebook, which is kind of all you can do now. But no, I won't tolerate it. I just don't want to have anything to do with those people. I don't want to have anything to do with them. I will not coddle them.
Right.
There are people, it's like, and then you get on Nextdoor and there's people they want to defend the rights of the people who don't want to wear the masks, and if you want to avoid them, why don't you just stay home instead of trying to get them to wear masks? And I'm like, shut up.
Has your diet of cable news and Facebook posts regarding political issues gone down as mine has?
Absolutely. Because, I am not willing to give him like one more nanosecond, of my time. I mean, I have moved on. I still will post about, the hypocrisy of all these anti-maskers getting in line, to be the first to get the shot. I mean, because that kind of stuff just really still, first of all, the Republican Party has become such a cesspool of hypocrisy. It's just all hypocrisy and lies. I honestly don't think that the Republican Party is going to survive Trump. It's the party of Trump. I used to be able to tolerate Republicans. I had friends who were Republicans. They had a different attitude about, like money and finances, and they were economic conservatives, but a lot of them were, like social liberals. They were like real people. But anyone who is a member of the Republican Party now, as far as I'm concerned, has drunk the Kool-Aid, which is why I love the Lincoln Project. Can I bring up the Lincoln Project?
I was going to ask, yes. Sure. Please.
I love the Lincoln Project, all the never-Trumper Republicans, Steve Schmidt in particular. The guy is brilliant. His diatribes on Twitter, that's the kind of stuff I want to read. And Rick Wilson and George Conway. This is my favorite. That Kellyanne's husband, is like I think he's quit the Lincoln Project to try and make some peace at home. I'm not sure. But it hasn't stopped him from writing op-eds in the New York Times and the Washington Post. But you just sort of think, oh, my God. But then I'm friends with Molly Jong Fast, who is doing a podcast with Rick Wilson. She's Erica Jong's daughter, the one who wrote, the Fear of Flying or whatever it was called.
Yes, Fear of Flying.
The amazing Zipless F. Anyway, so Molly is very good friends with George now, and she tells me that, they don't live together. They live separately. Their daughter threatened to run away from home, their 15-year-old daughter. The other person I love is Giuliani's daughter, who's like, just stay away from my father, like he's, and what about, okay, can we talk about the Four Seasons landscaping for a minute?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was the best thing ever. The Four Seasons landscaping and the press press conference with Giuliani between a crematorium and an adult dirty bookstore. This is the perfect metaphor for the Trump administration. Like, what a crap show this is. That who thought, they thought they were booking, I guess, the Four Seasons Hotel, and they booked the Four Seasons landscaping.
You've been lied to.
Forward to in the new year.
I'm looking forward to a new president. I'm looking for, not being embarrassed to be an American. I am looking forward to getting the vaccine. I'm looking forward to hopefully, this nightmare of COVID, coming under control. I'm looking forward to this administration who is going to, talk to the scientists like Dr. Fauci. I think that there's absolutely, hope on the horizon. I am looking forward to Donald Trump leaving the White House, whether it's voluntarily or being dragged out by the Secret Service. I am looking forward to baseball returning, as I look forward to it every year. My dad was a baseball guy, and I'm a baseball guy, and Arnie's a baseball guy. And, I'm looking forward to, some degree of normalcy. I think that we're all going to be able to take a deep breath. I haven't taken a deep breath really in 4 years. It has been exhausting. And I think that we're all going to be able to take a deep breath. And, and I think that people of goodwill, once again, are going to be able to prevail. So to your radio audience, I wish you all, happy holidays, and I think a very happy
New Year. And Happy New Year to you, Eileen. It's always good to catch up with you and
it's been a joy to
get your take on things.
I like to talk to you. It's been great to talk to you, and I like being with you guys. And I know what I'm looking forward to.
What?
I'm looking forward to an in-person visit to Montana.
Right.
You're always welcome.
Thank you for listening to What Do You Know?
I can't wait for the next show, Scott.
I'm excited too, Arnie. If you'd like to suggest a guest, send me an email at scottrichmond@townsquaremedia.com. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening to Newstalk KGVO.
My name is